Hey, welcome back to another episode of Ask Your Pastors. I'm back with Pastor Mike, and we're talking about spiritual disciplines. If you didn't catch part one of this conversation that we put out last week, we talked about how to practice spiritual disciplines without becoming legalistic in a way that actually gives life to us. And so, a lot of good thoughts that Mike had to share in that one. Mike, today, what the question I want to focus on is, uh, I think many of us feel kind of a pull, and sometimes it can be even dependent on our personality, where we can really be inclined towards getting alone with God, spiritual practices, Bible reading, prayer, silence and solitude, things like that, but not so much with engagement with the world. But we know that we're called to be in the world also, to engage with the world, to serve, to love others, to share our faith. Um, and some people can run in that direction, and aren't so good at stopping to be alone with God.
Right.
Is there, so that tension that we can feel, or that inclination in one direction or the other, is there a place for both? Do we need both? And if so, how do we begin to incorporate both aspects into our lives so that we can be faithful followers of Christ?
Yeah.
So maybe if we could start here. So we're talking spiritual formation.
hmm
That's using spiritual disciplines, practices as an element of formation. Could you give us a definition when you think about spiritual formation? Do you have a definition for us that might help us begin to think about this?
Sure. Yeah. So Robert Mulholland Jr. wrote a book called Invitation to a Journey, which probably just the title alone helped me because it invited me to a journey, not to a seminar or to a class or to a certification. It was like, okay, we're just going to go on a little journey here. And he defines spiritual formation as the process of being transformed into the image of Christ for the sake of others. And so there's about four parts there. And one of them is the process that he says you got to set the right expectations, that this isn't a test you study for and then do an exam. It's a lifelong transformation. So the process means this takes time. And every experience, every relationship is part of the process. Nothing's wasted with God. And I think it's really important that you remember, even what you look on your journey and say that was a failed time, it's not failed because it was part of the process that God is at work doing, which takes us to being transformed. God is doing something here in our lives, in our hearts, in our beings. And he is the one that's doing the work. We're not transforming ourselves. And when you believe your spiritual disciplines are about you transforming yourself, more than likely you're going to end up in that spot where you're constraining sin, you're restraining behavior, or you're making yourself do things, and you start getting a real dissonance emotionally. Like, I know these are the right things to do, but my heart wants to do all this other stuff. And you're like, what's going on? Christianity's not working for me. I mean, I hear that from people, it's like, this isn't work. And you're like, I know, because you're trying to be a Christian. God makes you a Christian and then transforms you into what? The image of Christ. So we don't just get transformed to something new. A caterpillar will be transformed into a butterfly, nothing else. We will be transformed into the image of Christ. That's the given that the scriptures tells us. And then the last part is for the sake of others. And that means both the church and the world, I think. And so we are in this process, and the process, you don't get to perfection before you get to help others. It's actually the others that helps the process. So yeah.
That's really good. I love that definition. I've heard you share that before. Um, I love that it brings together those two elements that we can sometimes feel in tension in our lives, um, because it doesn't just leave us in the, okay, this is about me and Jesus and my personal holiness and me doing my thing, getting it together, however we want to frame that. But there's the process of, this is all God's work. God work transforming us into the image of Christ, and it's for the sake of others. There's always that others element that we're brought into something. God wants to then do things in us and through us, that I think is a really healthy dynamic. Um, so for people who let's just talk. Let's talk to two groups if we
Yeah,
could.
okay.
Okay.
Yeah,
So
sure.
it is hard. Um, it is hard to slow down in our culture. It's hard to slow down when productivity is the name of the game. Um, our culture is just geared towards go, 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 5 days a week, and then on the weekends too, and try to get ahead till Monday. But you're never really going to do it. So Monday you're going to start in the hole, but you're going to try again and go, 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 and do it again. So to tell someone, hey, it's really important that you slow down, that you have, as I've heard them called, rhythms of withdrawal, that you need that. How would you kind of encourage someone who's in that mode? I don't know how to do that. What would you say to
Yeah.
them?
Well, if people know you and I, Donnie, you're describing me.
I
So
wasn't
I,
gonna say it.
yeah, I get it. I get it. But the second group of people I believe you're going to describe is you. So, hey, we're
I'll get
it.
my turn.
Yeah. So I think what would I say? I would ask the question, why? What is the primary motive for serving
Yeah.
all these people?
Hmm.
Um, why do you serve them? And so even in the process of slowing down enough to ask the question, why do I serve? Um, begins actually to allow God to begin to shape you. And so, I mean, I'm one of those guys that is like, production is pretty high on my list, and I like to produce a lot, because partly because God's created me a bit that way. I'm wired that way to not sit around and not do things. But at the same time, as I've done this process with God over these nearly 48 years now, um, 20 plus, 25 plus in ministry, um, I've discovered there was a whole lot of why that had to do with creating pleasure in the heart of God for me.
Yeah.
Um, and and when that is the motive, and you're moving so fast that you never ask the question why, God never gets to say, could you slow down so that I could tell you you're loved without all this? So
Mm.
then ministry starts being successful. You start having people gather around you. You have opportunity. And then you believe the lie that you're actually pleasing God. And then you start shaping, then you can't stop. You have to keep it up, because if I stop, then that means that God won't be happy. And it's so easy to just naturally get that. And so I would just say, just stop long enough, a few moments every day, to say, why am I doing the schedule I'm doing? And then in that moment, you'll find that that's the process. That's the piece,
Yeah.
is God will start speaking, and he'll start undoing. And you'll get to places that at first it'll just be like, oh, I don't have to please God. That's so freeing. And then you'll run into the cycle again. And you'll just I mean, God's going to be faithful to you to get you to belovedness. But that doesn't mean that he doesn't love those people. And it doesn't mean that all those people you are serving don't need to be loved.
Yeah.
Um, and you might actually be the vessel that will love them.
Yeah.
But the really weird thing is that you're actually taking from them, because you're not a gift to them, because you need them.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key right there, is when you need them for your own love and your own pleasure of what you believe God wants, then you're not actually serving them any longer. Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. It reminds me of Henry Nouwen, a statement that he says, when you don't know you're beloved, you'll run around seeking affirmation and praise and success, and you're not free then. But when you know you're loved, then you can begin to engage in a different way. And it's like what we shared in our last video, even that idea of, are we living for the heart of God or from it? Are we living for his smile or from it? We're meant to live from our acceptance, our being loved by him, that then frees us to serve in a different way.
Yeah.
Um, okay, so let's in our last few minutes, let's
Yeah.
kind of switch gears and
Sure.
let's speak to those who may be more like me, who maybe we tend to be more introverted. We like, set me by myself in my office with a book, alone, quiet, I'm good. But the relational piece, that's not always the strength. What is it? What's the talk? Just talk about that community, that need for relationship, that need to engage with the world, the the what we might call, if withdrawal is need on the one side, then there's also, out of that withdrawal, there's the need to return then. um, just talk, what would you say to someone who struggles with that? I just want to be alone, but I don't really want to do people.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Jesus tells us that that the world will know us by our love.
Mm,
And so guys that are wanting to love a lot, they go out and love, and they create all this community, and they do all this stuff, and we're like, let's see, we're loving. But actually we get really mad at those guys because we have to go out there because it's about us. It's not about them.
yeah,
For others, it's the opposite. It's like, I'm withdrawing because I believe that's the safest place for me. That's where I find my identity. And we treat possibly community as the place of that's going to take from me. But actually, it's the other side of the world will know you by your love. It's when you actually go out into the community, create those relational connections, and they love you as you are, that you're freed to be who you are. Because more than likely, a lot of people who are inward, they're going to be much more, their disciplines are going to be, hey, I need to be away from the crowd. I want to be quiet. But they believe that's the goal, is to be quiet and not engaged. And they don't see it as a strength to actually, God's putting something in you to actually be a gift to others. But eventually, I mean, in a production-based world like we have, it's so, I mean, you and I've been on opposite sides of that conversation, where we talk and it's like, man, Mike's doing all this and Donnie's over here and he wants to be more quiet, wants to prepare a message, and
yeah,
both are value, both are contribution. And
yeah,
you and I've done that conversation where we're going, actually, God's using both of us in very real ways.
yeah,
But if we say that it's about production, then we can make one person lesser because of their gifting. But this idea that we do it together, the inward and the outward,
mm-hmm,
is I need to be drawn inward so that I don't use people. You need to be drawn outward so you're not avoiding people.
right,
And so then because avoiding people and using people are both the negative, and God's saying, I want you to love people.
yeah,
And I want you to be able to have the capacity within your heart, within your soul, to love out of genuineness, not out of need.
yeah.
And so I think that's maybe a thought that I would have.
Yeah, I wonder too, and I've experienced this, that so much of the heart of God being communicated to me comes through other people. Like,
Mm,
God doesn't just, he does meet with us in that box, as we talked about last time, where we step into that alone space with him. He meets with us. He speaks to us through his word as we in times of prayer and when we're before him. Um, but he also speaks to us through other brothers and sisters as they get to be speakers of the gospel to us and get to share truth and remind us who God is. And we need that. We need that community aspect, and others need us to step into those spaces and share that. It's so important that there, you just can't. I heard a definition of blessing. I've been listening to this. It's kind of a morning prayer time thing, and they talked about Abraham, how God said, "I will bless you and make you a blessing,"
mm,
and they defined blessing as, "I will empower you to be and do all that I've created you to be and do, so that you can help others be and do all that I've created them to be and do."
oh, that's really
And
good.
and I've been thinking on that. I like that because I want to be and do what God has made me to be and do, and he's the one blessing, empowering, and he does that through others often. And he uses me in others' lives to be a blessing. I get to help others. So both the time with God informing ourselves, as well as the time in community that is formational to us in all of this,
Yeah.
uh, we grow in the gospel. We grow together as the body of Christ into the full measure of the stature of Christ, as it says in
Yeah.
Ephesians.
Yeah.
So
That's good. I think it's really helpful when we think about the world, even, is it's actually when you withdraw that you reconnect with the fact that you've been created in the image of God. I mean, we were created in his image for community,
yeah,
but it's only in alone places and in solitude that we actually discover we were created for something beyond solitude.
yeah,
But then when we go out to others, we're able to recognize they were also created for that. And we can receive well because we have been alone.
yeah,
Um, And then when we're with them, we celebrate this, and that comes
Yeah.
back. And when we're in solitude, we're no longer alone because we
Yeah.
know we're part of something. And so those two living in tension
That's
actually
good.
creates this really huge place for the world then to step in, because we can receive them, because
Yeah.
we have wholeness, and we can receive the world in all of its brokenness without judgment. I think that's a big deal. If we're loved, I can go into the world and the world can come to me and I don't have to judge it. I know that God has compassion on it. Yeah. So
I really like that. That's good. I think that's a good place to leave it. So,
yeah.
hey, thanks for last week and this week, these thoughts on
Sure.
spiritual formation and disciplines. I think this has been really helpful. So, I've enjoyed it, and we'll have to do more of these where you come and be a regular part of this Ask Your
Oh, I love it.
Pastors business. So,
Yeah, it's fun.
hey, thank you guys again for watching, tuning in. And if you have questions, if you have things you'd like to ask us, or topics that you'd like to hear us speak on, you can always let us know at askyourpastors@christianfellowship.com. And we'll look forward to talking to you again next time.